Every individual charged in the indictment is charged with one count of violating Georgia's Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act through participation in a criminal enterprise in Fulton County, Georgia, and elsewhere to accomplish the illegal goal of allowing Donald J. Trump to seize the presidential term of office beginning on January 20th, 21.
Hey everyone, welcome to what is now the fourth Gaslit Nation indictment special in this red hot American summer. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of this latest indictment, but first I just want to say hello to our YouTube viewers. Yes, Gaslit Nation is doing YouTube videos, and that's important because Elon Musk, Apartheid Barbie, has destroyed Gaslit Nation's reach on Twitter. He came in with whatever the fuck, his whole far-right boys club. It's like a literal far-right boys club. There's been reporting on how some of these Nazi influencers are being paid and so on, and is boosting their traffic and suppressing stuff like ours that talks about Ukraine and Russia, all those topics that Elon Musk conveniently doesn't want you to know about. So in order to rebuild the traffic we lost from the Elon Musk purchase of Twitter, we are venturing in the brave world of YouTube, TikTok, and so on. How do I feel about this? Well, as a mom of two little girls who, is dealing with all sorts of stuff, the genocide in Ukraine, I have somebody in my family who I'm extremely emotionally dependent on, close to, who is going through a horrible, horrible time with a terminal illness, has to be on oxygen and so on. So the last thing I want to do is appear before you on camera. Really the last thing I want. But I also believe that we have to reach, especially now, as many people as possible. And my desire to do that, my determination to do that, my determination to ensure that democracy prevails in this election, that people who are traitors to our country do not win in this upcoming election. All of that surpasses however the hell I might be feeling. I always believe that if you use your voice for a higher purpose, that is what will carry you. That is the wind in your sails. So just like I don't always feel like picking up the phone and phone banking, but I will do it. I will knock out 100 phone calls in a day. I will knock out 1,000 phone calls in a midterm. I make those phone calls regardless of how I feel, how tired I am, no matter what else I'd rather be doing. So I'm sort of taking the same approach to appearing on camera before you. And I want you to take note of my hair on this day, August 15th, 2023, because I have no doubt as we continue this, but as we move along, this hair is going to become like a full-on hairsprayed Fox News bouffant, just for the hell of it, just for fun, just sort of just to add a little bit of pepper flakes into this journey. All right, so let's get to it. So Fani Willis, the opening clip that you heard was Nazi hunter, Fulton County Attorney General Fani Willis announcing the indictment of Donald Trump and 18 co-conspirators for a sprawling organized crime operation trying to overthrow the results in Georgia. As I've been saying on the show, representation matters. Fani Willis, a black woman, an expert in RICO, surrounded by experts in RICO, came in with a very, very deeply well done, strongly baked indictment of mafia organized crime boss Donald Trump. And the reason why it matters that a black woman is doing this in Georgia, the heart of the civil rights struggle, is because it's black communities, it's non-white communities, it's communities that have always been scapegoated, LGBTQ communities and so on, that are on the front lines of fighting an existential crisis right now. And the reason why so many other people have woken up to what Trump is trying to do, including Republicans, including independents, is because finally this authoritarian history that built the United States of America is impacting white people too. So that's why you have this broad coalition. And it's really a reminder to us that diversity matters and representation matters. And I'm starting with that because I want to highlight a Gaslit Nation listener. We're going to shift gears for a second because this is important. This needs our attention. Nicole Spear, a scientist and a council member in Boulder, Colorado, is running for mayor of Boulder right now. She wrote back in the day that her motivation to run for office in the first place, which is an extremely daunting thing to do, and she won her race. She wrote on Twitter that she was inspired to do so by Gaslit Nation, by this podcast. And this is why we do the show. Like, this is why I will turn on this camera even when I don't feel like it, is because of listeners like that. We're trying to reach the Nicole Spears out there, the science believers, the fact-based thinkers, the ones with the good hearts, the lion-hearted out there. That is who we need to run for office. And as hard as that is, as daunting as that is, Nicole ran for city council in Boulder and won, and now she's running for mayor and she's going to win, and we're going to help her win. So please, please, please join me in donating whatever you can by going to NicoleForBoulder.com, NicoleForBoulder.com. She's running against two establishment politicians who were able to retire around the age of 50. So you know that they've got their own war chest. So we need to help her through grassroots power to build a war chest. And that is for Nicole Spear, a scientist and council member running for city council, who won her race for city council, who's now running for mayor. And we're going to put her over that finish line. So please join me in donating at NicoleForBoulder.com. That would mean so much to me and our community if we can all rally for Nicole Spear now and elect the woman mayor of Boulder, Colorado. Yay! And that is how we take back our democracy. That's how we strengthen our democracy, is community by community. So thank you so much, Nicole Spear, for running for office, for doing what needs to be done to protect our democracy where you live. And people can learn more about you and your amazing work by going to NicoleForBoulder.com. All right. So thank you. Also, another announcement, thank you to everyone who joined the Gaslit Nation live taping with the Risk Storytelling Podcast on August 5th. We are going to do another live taping in New York City. It won't be live streamed, unfortunately, but you can join us for that on Monday, September 18th at 7 p.m. at P&T Knitwear. That is going to be a live taping with me and Russian Mafia expert Olga Lotman. And we have a new guest joining us, and that is historian Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who is the author of the best-selling book, Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present. Strong Men is a book that it's if you love Gaslit Nation, you'd love Strong Men if you haven't read it yet. Ruth is wonderful. So we're going to be having a big discussion about what the hell do we do with a 4-time indicted career criminal, wannabe authoritarian, running for president. How do we rebuild democracy in America? How do we sustain ourselves in the fight? What resistance do these dictators work? How do these dictators work together in the transnational crime syndicate? What do we do about all this? So that's the conversation that's happening Monday, September 18th at P&T Knitwear in New York City, an independent bookstore, and that's 7 p.m. with Olga Lotman and Ruth Ben-Ghiat and myself for live taping Gaslit Nation. And for our Patreon listeners who support the show, we're going to do a special meetup with me before that taping, and that'll be at 6 p.m. And I'll leave the details for the Patreon community. If you want to join that special meetup before the live taping, go to patreon.com/gaslit, patreon.com/gaslit. And I look forward to seeing everyone there. These live tapings are fun. I'm super nervous before each one. I think that no one's going to go except my husband, who has no choice but to go to these things. And then I'm always so shocked when there's actually people in the audience and I get to meet people, I get to meet listeners, and I love it so much. And I'm thanking you all who come to these events. And I love hearing from you and talking from you and learning so much from all of you. Thank you. All right. So now let's get to the indictment fun. As you probably heard by now, Trump and 18 others have been charged. Trump now faces 91 felony counts. They have until Friday, August 25th to surrender. This is a state case, so if Trump is charged, he cannot overturn it if he becomes president. The RICO charges historically have been used to fight organized crime, the mafia, and as I mentioned earlier, Fani Willis is a RICO expert who surrounded herself with other RICO experts. This is a very tight case. Yes, it's sprawling. Yes, it's ambitious, but it's extraordinarily play-by-play detailed. showing that Fani Willis, of course, brought the receipts. She knew what she was doing in bringing this. The RICO charges will include jail time if convicted, and with a minimum of 5 years. A minimum of 5 years. Fani Willis says she plans to try all 19 defendants together, which is going to be a Kremlin clown car of a circus, of a trial, obviously. And, you know, Sidney Powell, Giuliani, Trump, all of these other poor bastards who, you know, these like smaller fish that are probably sitting there like looking like a deer in headlights because they betrayed their country. They really put their neck on a line for somebody who has no problem destroying whoever he needs to get to the top. So it's going to be wonderful to watch. It's going to be obviously very, you know, a lot of ups and downs and all that. And it's going to obviously play against Trump. And some of the reasons for that we'll get to. But here are the red flags. Trump can, of course, drag this out. Trump's team, like lawyer goon squad team, could try to kick this to the federal courts, hoping they'll have better luck there. Because, you know, Trump, of course, famously packed the judges. He and McConnell were able to seize 30% of our courts. So he's going to try to get this into the appeals process and so on and kick it to a higher court. The other red flags are that, yeah, maybe this can just drag out and it's not going to have any effect on the election, and the election is going to be extremely close in these must-win races. You have Trump and his team trying to fundraise off this, obviously. They're playing the martyr card, and that is going to infuriate their base and drive out their base. And the big advantage they have on the left is that they have the propaganda empire, the disinformation machine that is all being amplified by the Russian bot operation, which is of course going to still be in effect because the Russians desperately need their boy Trump to win so that they can then continue their pillaging of the United States, like entrenching themselves deeper in the U.S. and weaken the global democratic alliance and seize Ukraine for once and for all and just strengthen themselves and live above accountability and so on. And it's going to be obviously a dark cloud over the world if it should get to that. So things are going to be very tense from here on out. It's still early days. But let's look at, so those are the red flags. And of course you have threats of political violence against Fani Willis and her team and so on. So as promising as these charges are, things can go all sorts of ways. But here's the good news. With 18 charged besides Trump, that's a lot of opportunity to flip some of those idiots against Trump. And more those who are like lower fish on that totem pole would be more likely because they don't have his war chest, they don't have his sheen, they don't have his prime time power. So with 18 charged, some of those lower, smaller fish could flip on Trump and could allow Fani Willis and her team to circle Trump and get him, nab the big fish, landing him 5 years in jail minimum. Fighting these charges, all of these 19 people, including Trump, fighting these charges, that is going to be incredibly expensive, which isn't a small thing. You might think, well, Daddy Warbucks is propped up by all this dark money, and that is absolutely true. But regardless, it's still going to be a drain on resources they need for these must-win races, including House and Senate. We're talking about, with Trump being the front runner in the Republican primary so far, we're talking about the rotten heart of the Republican Party being on trial here in Georgia. And with this being one of 4 indictments, all of these political battles are going to continue to be a drain on the far right war chest. They're going to spread. Yes, they're extraordinarily wealthy. I understand. They're masters of the universe. They're the oligarchs. But it still takes money away from other must-win races. And as we see, like also money alone doesn't win races, but it's still going to be a drain on them. Fighting. So let's see. It's very now unlikely with this trial that's coming up in Georgia. It's now very unlikely that Trump wins Georgia, given that Georgians are going to be in the heart of this media circus. And so Georgia, he lost it famously by the 11,000 votes. So it looks like we're going to be within the margins of another Biden victory there, knock on wood. Another thing to look at is the recent bellwether election in Ohio, where a coalition of voters in Ohio defeated a GOP effort to protect the abortion ban there. And that recent victory in Ohio is significant because it's a reminder that even in the heartland, in states like Ohio that were traditionally purple, that have become more red thanks to Republican gerrymandering and a lot of efforts Republicans have made investing in the all-important state level, even those states show that you have Republicans and independents who are tired of Republican extremism, who are going too far. And so what this election is going to come down to, because remember, the Constitution still allows Trump to run. And the charges that Jack Smith brought in the third indictment were surgical. They're more narrow. And so nothing here so far is stopping Trump from running. So that means it's going to, yes, come down to the Gaslit Nation phone banks. We're all going to do with each other come fall of, and maybe even sooner in 2024. It's going to come down to us. And it's going to come down to communities like ours all across the country doing whatever they can, wherever they can. I know that does not sound fair. I know that's not fair. But as I've been saying on this show, since the beginning of the show, Trump should have never been even allowed to run for office. A well-known Kremlin operative like Paul Manafort was the smoking gun, the clear signal to the American intelligence community that if Paul Manafort was running Donald Trump's campaign, that meant the Kremlin was running Donald Trump's campaign. So the establishment stopping us from saving us from Trump should have happened a long time ago. Like, the FBI has no excuse because they knew. Ukraine brought the FBI in early 2014 to help them hunt down Yanukovych's stolen billions from Ukraine. Paul Manafort would have been somebody on their radar in doing that. So the FBI had no excuse. And I understand that all of these inside the Beltway folks, these prosecutors are now making money off of book deals, and they're going on cable news now, and they're not going to be the ones to tell you this, but I'm telling you, he should have been stopped a long time ago. The establishment failed us. The intelligence community failed us. And Obama's foreign policy team failed us. And if you want to know more on that, just go to our transcripts page. We've been covering that for a very long time. So here we are because too many people failed us. So now it's, again, coming down to us to stop a career criminal, a well-known Russian mafia asset. Just look at the Mueller report and the Senate intelligence report from one of the worst traitors that have ever plagued this country, a proud neo-Confederate, a grandmaster of the KKK, from becoming president of the United States. Yes, it's coming down to us. It shouldn't be, but that's where we are. And as an independent film producer, somebody that had to stare reality in the face over and over and over again just to get my film made, I had to stare into the dark abyss of my reality all the time. Like, here, I have all these limited resources. I have all of this working against me. What am I going to do? I'm applying that same scrappy determination to where we are now as a country. Yes, it's coming down to us to stop him. But please, please, please look at Ohio, which is the special election in Ohio, as an important bellwether, reassurance that enough Republicans and enough independents are tired of this extremism. And with all of these trials popping off now, with these 4 indictments, the Kremlin clown car is going to be on full display. You're going to have a Sidney Powell, Giuliani running their mouth, Paul Manafort, well-known Kremlin operative Paul Manafort, running their mouth all over the propaganda machine of the right. And they think they're going to be, and their determination, like their Hail Mary pass, what they have to work with is to drive out the base with their nonsense on. It's a weaponization of government, with the martyrdom of Donald J. Trump. That's what they're going to use to infuriate their base, drive them out, and likely along the way drive some of them to commit acts of political violence. But they're not going to reach the independents. They're not going to reach the Republicans that left the party. And I assure you, some of my optimism in talking this way comes from my own phone banking. I would talk to a lot of independents who had never voted in their life, who were determined to vote because Trump scared them, because they had studied Third Reich history. They'd studied the rise of Hitler, so they knew they had to vote. They knew they had to become active. That's what we're dealing with now across the country. And if you're feeling despondent, discouraged, and cynical about all this, join me in making phone calls, and you'll hear from other Americans in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, and Georgia that they are independents, maybe like you. They are former Republicans or Republicans, maybe like you, and they see very clearly, like you, what is going on. We are not alone in this. So please, please, please keep that in mind. Remember that. That's a fact. So that is that. Oh, Fannie Willis. Whew. Fannie Willis. I And yeah, this is now a Fannie Willis fan account, a Fannie Willis fan YouTube page. So Fannie Willis knows what she is doing. She telegraphed to the American people. She told them very clearly, like, I understand that I am sticking my neck out there. I'm risking my life for this democracy and for my country. She thanked her security team in protecting her and her team. And she said, they've been protecting me, they've been keeping me safe, and they're going to continue to do that. That is not a small thing that she said, because as we've seen with the many lives that Donald Trump has tried to destroy, especially with these election observers who are just doing their job and monitoring a polling place. We need more good people doing that, and they're being intimidated, they're being scared out of that work. Fannie Willis knows the risk that she and her family and the people around her are taking by bringing justice and accountability. And she let us know, yes, I know my life's on the line, but I've got good people around me and they're going to stick by me. And I'm not going to be intimidated by this organized crime operation. That is what she said in her press conference. That is what I heard. And it's reassuring to hear that. And I hope to God that that team is hyper vigilant, takes nothing for granted, and understands how precious their charge is right now, like what they're, who they're protecting. It's extraordinarily important. So I do have faith in the work they're doing down in Georgia. I do understand the historic significance of it in the larger journey of America's confrontation with our own authoritarian history in the march towards civil rights. And I do believe that this is something that is going to tip the scales in the favor of democracy as we move towards 2024. And I understand there's plenty of red flags. There's plenty of ways that the Trump Kremlin clown car can work this, manipulate this, and we're still early days. But so far, what we've seen so far is very promising. And that brings us to what needs to happen next. So you have Paul Manafort wasting no time getting on Sean Hannity's Russian state TV program on Fox News and basically coming out with the talking points. As I already mentioned, it's, Paul Manafort saying, Donald Trump's a martyr just like me. And he's of course pushing his own book where he rewrites history and frames himself as a martyr for the cause. Never mind that he's a longtime Kremlin operative who worked closely with the Donald Trump of Ukraine, Yanukovych, and he did all sorts of things, including dividing Ukrainians against each other, playing up those culture wars, turning Ukraine, trying to stage these protests, these anti-NATO protests in Crimea, seeding the groundwork essentially for Russia's invasion, seizure of Crimea, and so on and so on. Even advising Yanukovych as Yanukovych had his riot police, his snipers shooting, killing pro-democracy protesters in Kiev, and Yanukovych's forces were working with Russian-trained snipers and other military on trying to violently suppress what was a popular uprising. And Paul Manafort was in the heart of that as the hand to the Donald Trump wannabe king, Viktor Yanukovych, who had a sprawling McMansion paid for, built with stolen money from the Ukrainian people. Okay, and how much of that money did Paul Manafort get? So he's back. So we'll play a little bit of a clip of how he's trying to spin this all so we get an idea of what we're in for.
All of these theories are meant to have one purpose, to derail Donald Trump. And what they don't understand is that the fair-minded Americans, on top of those who believe in Trump, are starting to see that this weaponization is a threat to their rights. And parents at school board meetings, Catholics at pro-life conferences, they're starting to see the infiltration of what is the abuse of Donald Trump's constitutional rights. And I think as a result, that's why he's getting stronger, not weaker with these charges. But look, they're trying to keep him in courtrooms. Probably this one they'll start trying to ask a November court date so that they can have November and January and March and May, and try and have something happen that can expose it. Well, it's not fair. People see it. And I trust the American people. I trust that we're going to find that even in Fulton County, where they're relying on Trump saying he'd try to find me 11,700 votes. Well, what was he supposed to ask for, 6,000 votes? Of course he was going to ask for the amount of votes that would win him the state.
So I cannot emphasize how dangerous Paul Manafort is. I understand that the DOJ treats criminals like him as though they're nonviolent, but they are, as I've said many times on the show, the Paul Manaforts of the world are extraordinarily violent. Anyone who has served, who has worked for, taken money from Russian oligarchs, they are on the payroll of the Russian mafia state, of the Russian mass murdering terrorist state. For instance, there are these two Russian oligarchs, including one of the fancier ones who cleans up very nice in the West, Mikhail Friedman, who were just sanctioned by the U.S. for supplying financing to the Russia's war machine that's carrying out genocides across Ukraine, including the systemic rape of people, including children, in front of their parents. Like, that's who Paul Manafort represents. Paul Manafort was able to Paul Manafort is somebody who should still be in prison. Andrew Weissman, one of the leading prosecutors on Mueller's team, wrote a piece for Just Track Security, which I could link to in the show notes. He wrote a piece where he said that, hey, Paul Manafort's coming out with a book. Well, that the DOJ should look into how that clearly violates his plea deal, and so on. And so Andrew Weissman makes the case on how Paul Manafort should still be on the DOJ's radar. And if the DOJ would wake the fuck up, Merrick Garland, and go after Paul Manafort, who is a clear traitor to our country, who is currently using Fox News to try to rally Trump's base, which we've seen it has no problem turning to violence to try to overthrow our democracy and intimidate public officials, okay? So that's what Paul Manafort is doing. He did the same thing to help bring Yanukovych to power. He did the same thing to bring Trump to power. And now he's doing it again. And it's very clear that he's got a lot of money at stake, because if he can get Trump elected again, and Russia will be very happy with him, and he would get a lot of that easy Russian money flowing to him if it's not already flowing to him now. So Paul Manafort needs to be investigated. The DOJ needs to wake up. Jack Smith needs to, bring his square jaw over to Merrick Garland and say, get on this, because Paul Manafort is a national security threat. He has no business going on Sean Hannity and spewing his Kremlin talking points for a well-known Russian asset. Get on this yesterday. We're sitting ducks if you don't finally bring Paul Manafort, the head of the torturers lobby, to justice. He's an inherently violent man. But I was impressed to see that he finally came to terms with the hair dye. He's no longer using that sweaty, melty Rudy Giuliani hair dye. So that does show a tiny bit of growth, but he's still a career criminal. He's still a traitor to our country, and he needs to be locked up. Paul Manafort understands the dark arts of all this stuff. We're going to have extremely close elections in these must-win states, in the blue wall of the Midwest and Arizona, and even, yes, Georgia. And so Paul Manafort is someone who knows how to tip those scales. Like I said, he's going to cash in on that opportunity. The Kremlin, when he goes on Fox News, the Kremlin sees this. The Kremlin knows that he's still in the game. So you understand there's clearly going to be something transactional going around right now between Paul Manafort and the Kremlin, with Paul Manafort out there basically telegraphing, letting the Kremlin know, I'm out here fighting for you because I'm out here fighting for Trump. All right. And this guy needs to be locked up. He needs to be investigated. So I'll move on from that because I feel like I'm just going to keep repeating myself in rage. So now Rudy Giuliani, another highlight of Fani Willis's indictment is that New York's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, he was hit with RICO charges, the same RICO charges that he used to take down the Italian mob to make room for the Russian mafia in New York City. Now, Giuliani is someone who, like Trump, used The Apprentice. Giuliani used his time as New York City mayor and taking down the Italian mob, really bragging about he's the RICO guy, and then he gets hit with RICO. So that's nice. That's a very cherry on the sundae there. Thank you, Fani Willis. And I want to just sort of back into how, sort of the significance of that. When Giuliani cleaned up New York City from the Italian mafia, what happened? The Russian mafia moved in. The Russian mafia came and started to grow. Why is that so significant? Well, I spoke to a long-time developer, somebody who was very active in Russia and other post-Soviet states in the early years, in the car bomb 90s and so on, who told me that Russia was the only country he worked in globally in working on these massive development projects, like building buildings. And he said that Russia was the only country he worked in globally where the money tap was always on, where they always brought their own money. He never had to bring outside capital into Russia. The money was always there. Russia is a country, because of the corruption, because of all of the pillaging from all of their natural resources, because of the Kremlin's court of oligarchs that the FSB controls, because they together, Putin It is the like that whole sort of like FSB apparatus, which today makes Putin one of the wealthiest men, if not the wealthiest man in the world, given the entire pool of money that he controls with all of these Russian oligarchs combined. The money was always there. The money was always easy. That is what made Fred Trump, and that is what made Donald Trump. Fred Trump ate from that easy Russian money trough in building up Brighton Beach. Donald Trump built off his father's legacy by developing Little Moscow, Sunny Isles, Florida, making that into the Brighton Beach of Florida. And Rudy Giuliani made way for all of this by helping the Russian mafia push out their competition, the Italians. The Italians simply did not have easy money on the level of the Russians. And that's why the Russians were able to come in and entrench themselves in the US, and within a few short decades, help bring one of their assets to power. That is why very early on this show, I said the election of Donald Trump is a marriage between the Russian mafia in the West and the Russian mafia in the East. That's what we're facing. And Paul Manafort and Giuliani were key to making that happen. When Paul Manafort was going through all of his legal troubles, where he was being squeezed by the Mueller team, who did not squeeze him hard enough, in my opinion, because the guy got away, he was able to have a case that could be pardoned, and there's been no backup cases, no safety guards since, right? So you guys, hey, Mueller team, you should have seen that pardon coming, because Trump was dangling the pardon right before your eyes. And so you should have had some mechanism in place, something ready to go for when Trump would have hit one of the worst criminals that have ever wreaked havoc, not just in the U.S., but in Ukraine. You should have had something ready for that, and you didn't. So I'm sorry, Mueller team, you did not go far enough with Paul Manafort. But when he was going through all that, and he was busy, he was cooped up in prison, I asked on this show, I'm like, who is going to be the next Paul Manafort? Who's going to go take Paul Manafort's business with pro-Kremlin politicians in Ukraine? And sure enough, it was Rudy Giuliani. He was out there trying to create some fake scandal on Biden. CNN even reported that he was going after my sister, like pushing Zelensky's team to invent dirt against her and Biden, my sister being Oksana Chalupa, the independent DNC contractor who'd warned anyone who would listen that if Paul Manafort was here managing Trump's campaign, that meant the Kremlin was here, and so on. So Giuliani is just, so Giuliani was just the new Paul Manafort, was just sort of an extension of that whole operation. And I want to really stress to people how significant this is, because what we're really talking about are not just threats to our democracy, but national security threats. National security threats. These are people that were serving the Kremlin's interests. And it shows, it absolutely shows, because in Trump's own Brighton Beach in Florida, Sunny Isles, the Little Moscow of Florida, where there's all this like dark Russian money, these LLCs buying up all of these condos. Recently, the FBI, just this last May, did a raid on a Russian-owned condo in a Trump Tower building where they arrested these Russians who were trying to help the Russian terrorist state circumvent sanctions by smuggling them much needed parts for their airlines. Okay. And so that just goes to show that is the legacy of Fred Trump. That is the legacy of Donald Trump. They are traitors to our country. They sold us out. They sold us out for that easy, dirty Russian money. Fred Trump started this. Donald Trump built on it. And Don Jr. and Eric Trump have both admitted that they are dependent on Russian money. And of course, Ivanka cashed in on this as well and built her legacy off of it. So remember, everything that's happening with these indictments, this is the fourth one in this red hot American summer. Everything that's happening with these indictments, it is not just a threat to our democracy, it is a national security threat. So wherever you're listening around the world, understand that we here in America, we're fighting for our country. We're fighting to protect the most vulnerable communities. We're fighting to protect people who are being violently scapegoated right now through all this genocidal rhetoric right now, the LGBTQ communities, the obviously women with the abortion bans that are taking lives and so on. We are fighting for our own country. We're fighting to take it back. We're fighting to rebuild what we've lost. And we're also fighting for you, wherever you live in the world, because the Global Democratic Alliance, I don't know if American democracy cannot survive if Trump gets into the White House. And I don't think the Global Democratic Alliance, I don't know what they would do if America falls. I don't know, I shudder to think what Ukraine would do if America falls. And so what we're really fighting here in the United States, what Fani Willis is putting her life on the line to do, is protect all of us. And thank you for that. This is a very strong indictment. It's a very promising indictment. And I know as scary as things are and overwhelming as things are, we're going to keep doing what we've always done. We're going to fight for the truth. We're going to try to sustain and be as resilient as possible in self-care and take care of ourselves and take care of our community as much as possible. Refuse to abandon anyone. We're going to carry each other through this, and we're going to get through this. And I do believe with that Ohio bellwether election that ultimately we're going to stop him again, because we have no choice.